Chapter 1. The Enigmatic Invitation. The rain pattered against the windows of Hercule Poirot's London flat, a dreary rhythm that matched the monotony of the morning. The little Belgian detective sat at his desk, his moustache impeccably waxed, his green eyes scanning a pile of correspondence with mild disdain. Invitations to dull society gatherings, requests for lectures. None stirred the grey cells. He sighed, adjusting the precise alignment of his pen, when a single envelope caught his attention. It was unremarkable save for its weight, the paper thick and cream-coloured, sealed with a dab of crimson wax. No return address, only his name inked in a hurried, elegant script. Monsieur Hercule Poirot. He sliced it open with a silver letter opener, his movements deliberate, and unfolded a single sheet. "Monsieur Poirot," it began, "your reputation precedes you. In the village of St. Aldwin, a matter most perplexing demands your singular intellect. A tombstone in our churchyard bears no name, yet its epitaph speaks of guilt and deceit. The village is unsettled, truths long buried stir. Come at once, discretion is paramount. A car will await you at King's Cross, 10 a.m. tomorrow. A friend." Poirot's eyebrows arched. "A friend, mon Dieu," he murmured, tapping the letter against his chin. "And yet this friend conceals their name while revealing their fear." He reread the note, noting the urgency beneath its polished words. A tombstone without a name. An epitaph of guilt. His grey cells hummed with curiosity. He glanced at the clock. 11:30. There was time to prepare, to ponder. He rang for his valet, George, who appeared with the silent efficiency of a shadow. "George," Poirot said, rising, "pack my case for a short journey. Tomorrow I travel to the countryside, and fetch my coat, the weather. It is most disagreeable." "Very good, sir," George replied, his tone as crisp as his starched collar. "Might I inquire the destination?" "St. Aldwin," Poirot said, savouring the name. "A village, I suspect, with secrets as heavy as its fog." The next morning, Poirot stood at King's Cross, his polished shoes gleaming despite the drizzle. At precisely 10 a.m., a sleek black car rolled up, its driver a taciturn man in a grey cap. He opened the door without a word, and Poirot settled into the leather seat, his mind already dissecting the letter's phrases. Guilt and deceit. Who had written it? A villager? A fugitive? Or someone playing a game? The journey to St. Aldwin passed in a blur of green hills and mist-shrouded lanes. As the car slowed at the village's edge, Poirot glimpsed a stone church steeple piercing the fog, its clock frozen at midnight. Beyond it, a churchyard sprawled, tombstones tilting like weary sentinels. One, he sensed, held the key to this mystery. The driver halted at a modest inn, its sign reading "The Raven's Rest." A woman waited at the door, her face pale, her eyes darting. She was in her 40s, her dark hair pinned tightly, her hands twisting a handkerchief. "Monsieur Poirot?" she asked, her voice low. "Oui, c'est moi," he replied, tipping his hat. "And you, madam, are my anonymous friend?" She hesitated, glancing at the empty street. "I'm Eleanor Vance. I wrote the letter. Forgive the secrecy, but the village is watching. Will you come to the churchyard? The tombstone? It's wrong." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Wrong, madame. Then let us see this tombstone that lies. Lead on." As they walked toward the church, the fog thickened, swallowing the village in silence. Poirot's mind raced. Eleanor Vance's fear was genuine, but her story was incomplete. What truth did the nameless grave conceal? And why did it unsettle St. Aldwin? Mimou, the game, he thought, had begun. Chapter 2. The Village of Secrets. The fog clung to St. Aldwin like a jealous lover, muffling the crunch of gravel beneath Hercule Poirot's polished shoes as he followed Eleanor Vance towards the churchyard. The village was a watercolour of grey stone cottages, their windows shuttered as if guarding secrets. The air smelled of damp earth and something sharper. Fear, perhaps. Poirot's keen eyes noted every detail. A curtain twitching in a nearby house, the distant bark of a dog, the way Eleanor's steps quickened as they neared the church. "Madame Vance," Poirot said, his voice cutting through the mist, "you have told me of this tombstone, but not why it troubles you so. What is it you fear?" Eleanor's lips tightened. "It's not just me, Monsieur Poirot. The whole village feels it. That grave. It's like a wound that won't heal. People whisper it's cursed, that it lies about who's buried there." Poirot's moustache twitched. "A tombstone that lies? Most interesting. And these whispers, they point to a crime." She glanced back, her eyes shadowed. "I don't know, but after I found that epitaph, things changed. Arguments, suspicions, it's tearing us apart." They reached the churchyard gate, its iron hinges groaning as Eleanor pushed it open. The tombstones stood in uneven rows, some moss-covered, others cracked by time. At the far end, beneath a gnarled yew tree, was the grave in question. Poirot approached, his heart quickening, not with fear, but with the thrill of a puzzle. The tombstone was stark, its surface unnaturally clean compared to its neighbours. No name adorned it, only an epitaph carved in sharp, deliberate letters. "But here lies one who bore the weight of deceit, condemned by truth unspoken." Below, a date, 1895. Poirot knelt, his gloved fingers tracing the words, his mind already dissecting their meaning. "Condemned by truth unspoken," he murmured. "A curious phrase, n'est-ce pas? It suggests a secret kept, a guilt unconfessed. Yet no name. Why?" Eleanor wrung her handkerchief. "That's what I can't understand. The other graves have names, stories. This one, it's like it was meant to be forgotten. Or hidden." Poirot stood brushing his coat. "Hidden, yes, but not forgotten. Or you would not have written to me. Tell me, who tends this churchyard? Who might know its history?" Before Eleanor could answer, a shadow moved at the church door. A man emerged, his face weathered, his cassock marking him as the vicar. He was tall, with greying hair and eyes that seemed to carry the weight of the village's sins. "Mrs. Vance," he said, his voice soft but edged, "you've brought a stranger to our troubles." Eleanor stiffened. "This is Monsieur Hercule Poirot, Reverend Hale. He's here to help." Poirot bowed slightly. "Bonjour, Monsieur le Révérend. I am, as you say, a stranger, but one who seeks only the truth. This tombstone intrigues me. Do you know its story?" Reverend Hale's gaze flickered to the grave, then back to Poirot. "It's old, older than my time here. The records are incomplete. I'd advise you not to stir up what's best left buried." Poirot smiled thinly. "Alas, monsieur, the stirring has already begun. The epitaph speaks of deceit. Was there a scandal in 1895, perhaps? A death that divided the village? The vicar's jaw tightened. You'll find no answers here. The past is dust. Yet dust, when disturbed, reveals much, Poirot countered, his tone polite but unyielding. A new voice interrupted, sharp and gravelly. What's this about the grave? A woman approached, her shawl pulled tight against the chill. She was elderly, her face a map of wrinkles, but her eyes burned with defiance. Eleanor, you've no right dragging outsiders into our business. Mrs. Tuttle, Eleanor said, her voice strained. Monsieur Poirot is a detective. He can help. Help? Mrs. Tuttle scoffed, glaring at Poirot. That grave's been quiet for decades. You'll only bring trouble, poking where you're not wanted. Poirot tilted his head, studying her. Madame, your passion suggests you know more than you say. Perhaps you were here in 1895. Lips pursed, but she said nothing, turning abruptly and vanishing into the fog. Reverend Hale excused himself, muttering about duties, leaving Poirot and Eleanor alone. Mon Dieu, Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. The village guards its secrets well. But secrets, madame, are like cracks in a dam. They widen under pressure. Eleanor shivered. What will you do now? I shall observe, Poirot said, glancing at the tombstone. And listen. The grave has spoken its first words. I must learn to whom they belong. As they left the churchyard, Poirot's mind churned. The epitaph was no mere memorial. It was a challenge, a cipher to a crime. And someone in St. Aldwin, he was certain, knew the truth behind the tombstone that lied. Chapter 3. The Tombstone's Tale. The morning sun struggled through St. Aldwin's persistent fog, casting a pale glow over the churchyard. Hercule Poirot stood before the nameless tombstone, his small, neat figure a stark contrast to the looming yew tree above. The epitaph, "Here lies one who bore the weight of deceit, condemned by truth unspoken," seemed to pulse with hidden meaning. Eleanor Vance hovered nearby, her nervous energy palpable, but Poirot's focus was absolute, his grey cells whirring like a finely tuned machine. "Madame Vance," he said without looking up, "you will please remain still. The tombstone, it speaks but only to those who listen with care." Eleanor nodded, clutching her coat. I feel watched." Poirot's eyes flicked to the churchyard's edges, where shadows lingered in the mist. We are observed, but let them watch. Hercule Poirot does not unravel a mystery by stealth, but by precision. He knelt, his gloved hands hovering over the tombstone's surface. It was granite, polished to an unnatural sheen, unlike the weathered stones nearby. The carving was deep, deliberate, yet the edges of the letters were crisp, unmarred by decades of wind or rain. He tilted his head, noting the date, 1895, 30 years prior, yet the stone looked no older than a year. "Curieux," he murmured. "This stone, it is too young for its age. A tombstone from 1895 should bear the scars of time. Moss, erosion, cracks. Yet this one shines as if placed yesterday." Eleanor frowned. Could it have been cleaned or replaced? Poirot's moustache twitched. Cleaned, perhaps, but replaced. No, the ground beneath is undisturbed, the roots of the yew entwined, as if the stone has stood here for decades. And yet He tapped the granite lightly. "The contradiction, it intrigues me." He circled the grave, his eyes scanning the earth. The grass was patchy, but no signs of recent digging marred the soil. At the base of the stone, however, he spotted a faint irregularity. A thin line of dirt, slightly darker than the rest, as if something had been pressed into the ground and removed. He crouched, producing a small magnifying glass from his coat pocket. "Voilà," he said, peering through the lens. "A trace of wax, red and hardened. Someone has sealed something. Here, perhaps a note or a token, and taken it away." Eleanor gasped. "Wax? Like on the letter I sent you?" Poirot's gaze sharpened. "Précisément. The coincidence. It is no coincidence. Tell me, madam, who in this village uses crimson sealing wax?" She shook her head. "I don't know. I found the wax in my late husband's study, but he's been gone 5 years. I thought it fitting for the letter." Poirot filed this away, his mind turning to the epitaph's words. Deceit, truth unspoken. The phrase suggested a personal betrayal, a secret so heavy it demanded a grave silence. But whose? He stood, brushing his gloves, and turned to Eleanor. "Madam, I must see the church records. If this grave is from 1895, there will be a burial entry, named or not. Reverend Hale, he keeps these records." "Yes, in the vestry," she said, hesitating. "But he's protective of them. He says they're fragile." "Fragile, peut-être, but truths are not so easily broken," Poirot replied, his tone firm. "Come, we shall pay the good Reverend a visit." They crossed the churchyard, the fog swirling around them. Inside the church, the air was cold, the stained-glass windows casting dim mosaics of light. Reverend Hale was at the altar, arranging candles, but his movements slowed as he saw Poirot approach. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice guarded, "you're persistent." "Naturellement," Poirot replied, smiling. "The truth, it is a stubborn thing, n'est-ce pas? I require access to the burial records, those of 1895 in particular." Hale's eyes narrowed. "The records are incomplete. A fire in the vestry years ago destroyed many. You'll find little. Then I shall find what remains," Poirot said, undeterred. "Even a fragment, monsieur, may speak louder than a lie." Reluctantly, Hale led them to a cramped vestry, its shelves lined with dusty ledgers. He pulled a volume marked 1890, 1900, its pages brittle and yellowed. Poirot donned his spectacles, scanning the entries with methodical care. Births, marriages, deaths. But for 1895 the burial records were sparse. Only one entry caught his eye, written in faded ink. "Unknown, interred April 1895. No ceremony." "No name," Poirot said softly. "Yet a burial without ceremony is rare, even for a pauper. Who authorized this, Reverend?" Hale shrugged. "I wasn't here then. The old vicar, Father Grayson, kept poor records. He died not long after." "Convenient," Poirot murmured, closing the ledger. "But the tombstone, it was not placed in 1895, I think. Its youth betrays it. Someone, perhaps recently, insured. This grave would not be forgotten." Hale's face remained impassive, but his fingers twitched. "You see mysteries where there are none, monsieur." "Au contraire," Poirot said, his eyes gleaming. "I see a mystery where others see only stone." As they left the vestry, Poirot's mind raced. The tombstone was a lie, not in its words, but in its existence. It was too new, too deliberate. Someone had crafted it to draw attention, to provoke. But why? And what did the wax trace mean? The puzzle was growing, and Poirot relished its complexity. Outside, a figure lingered near the church gate. Mrs. Tuttle, her shawl tight, her eyes fixed on Poirot. She turned away as he noticed her, but not before he saw the fear in her gaze. Dieu, Poirot said to Eleanor, his voice low. The village keeps its silence, but the tombstone it begins to whisper. And I, Hercule Poirot, shall make it sing. Chapter 4. Whispers of the Past. The Raven's Rest, St. Aldwin's only inn, was a low-ceilinged haven of flickering firelight and murmured conversations. Hercule Poirot sat at a corner table, a cup of tisane steaming before him, his sharp eyes scanning the room. The villagers, gathered for their midday meal, cast wary glances his way, their voices dropping when he met their gaze. Eleanor Vance had excused herself to attend to errands, leaving Poirot to pursue the village's secrets alone, and he relished the challenge. Mon Dieu, he murmured, sipping his drink. The air here is heavy with stories untold. But Hercule Poirot, he knows how to coax the truth from reluctant lips. He rose, his movements precise, and approached the bar, where the innkeeper, a stout man named Mr. Carver, polished glasses with exaggerated focus. His ruddy face betrayed a flicker of unease as Poirot leaned in, his moustache gleaming under the lamplight. Monsieur Carver, Poirot began, his tone genial. You are, I think, a man who hears much. The grave in the churchyard, the one without a name. Surely you know the tales that surround it. Carver's cloth paused mid-swipe. Tales, sir. Just old gossip. Folks say it's bad luck, that's all. Best left alone. Gossip, monsieur, is the shadow of truth. Poirot countered, his eyes narrowing. In 1895, something happened in St. Aldwin, n'est-ce pas? A death, perhaps, that left whispers. Carver glanced at the other patrons, then leaned closer. All right, but keep it quiet. Back then, they say a stranger came to the village. Nobody knew his name. Stayed a month, then vanished. Some reckon he's the one in that grave. Others say he caused trouble and got what he deserved. Trouble? Poirot's voice was soft, encouraging. Of what kind? Carver shrugged. Depends who you ask. Theft, betrayal, some even whisper murder. But it's all hearsay. Nobody agrees, and nobody's got proof. Poirot nodded, filing away the stranger's story. Before he could press further, a new voice cut in, sharp and accusing. You're stirring up ghosts, foreigner. Mrs. Tuttle stood at the bar, her hands planted on her hips, her eyes blazing. That grave's nothing but a sad old story. Let it be. Poirot turned, his smile polite but unyielding. Madam Tuttle, your concern for the past is most touching. Were you here in 1895? Perhaps you knew this stranger. Her face tightened, but she didn't flinch. I was a girl then. I remember enough. People died, people left. That's life. You're making mountains out of dust. Yet this dust, Poirot said, it clings to the village's heart. Tell me, what do you say the grave holds? Mrs. Tuttle hesitated, her defiance wavering. A fool who crossed the wrong folk. That's all I'll say. Ask the Hendersons. They've got stories too. She turned abruptly, her shawl flapping. As she left the inn, Poirot's grey cells hummed. The Hendersons. A new thread to pull. He thanked Carver and made his way to a table where a young woman sat alone, her hands fidgeting with a teacup. She was in her 20s, her auburn hair loosely braided, her expression troubled. A small nameplate on her apron read, Clara, Mademoiselle. Clara? Poirot said, bowing slightly. May I join you? I am Hercule Poirot, and I seek to understand the history of your village. Clara's eyes widened, but she nodded. You're the detective, aren't you? About the grave? People are talking. And I wish to hear what they say. You are a Henderson, perhaps? My mother's a Henderson, Clara said, her voice soft. She's got stories from her grandmother about 1895. Says the grave's for a woman, not a man, someone who broke a promise. Poirot leaned forward, intrigued. A woman? And this promise, what was its nature? Clara bit her lip. Something about money or land. A betrayal. Gran said the woman was shunned, buried without a name to punish her. But Mother thinks it's nonsense, says it was just a pauper's grave. Fascinant, Poirot murmured. A stranger, a fool, a betrayed woman. Such different tales for one grave. And you, mademoiselle, what do you believe? Clara glanced toward the door, as if expecting Mrs. Tuttle's return. I don't know, but the epitaph? It feels personal, like someone wanted her remembered, even if they hid her name. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Précisément. The epitaph is the key. It accuses, yet it mourns. Tell me, who else in St. Aldwin might recall 1895? Clara hesitated. Old Mr. Wren, maybe. He's near 90, lives by the mill. But he's odd, keeps to himself. Merci, mademoiselle, Poirot said, rising. You have been most helpful. As he left the inn, the fog seemed thicker, the village's silence heavier. The stories clashed. A male stranger, a shunned woman, a fool who crossed the powerful. Each held a fragment of truth, but none fit the tombstone's pristine condition or its cryptic words. The wax trace, the sparse burial record, the frozen church clock, all pointed to a deception that spanned decades. Poirot paused at the churchyard gate, gazing at the nameless grave in the distance. You hide your secrets well, he said softly, but Hercule Poirot, he is not so easily deceived. The past, it whispers, and I shall hear its truth. Chapter 5. The First Suspect. The path to old Mr. Wren's cottage wound past St. Aldwin's mill, where the river murmured secrets to the fog. Hercule Poirot walked with purpose, his cane tapping the uneven stones, his mind sifting through the village's conflicting tales. A stranger, a betrayed woman, a fool. Each story circled the nameless grave, yet none explained its pristine, stone or cryptic epitaph. Clara's mention of Mr. Wren, a man who had lived through 1895, promised answers, or, at the very least, a new thread to unravel. The cottage appeared through the mist, a squat structure of weathered stone, its windows dark save for a faint flicker of candlelight. Ivy clung to the walls, as if shielding the house from prying eyes. Poirot knocked, his rap sharp and deliberate. Silence followed, then the shuffle of slow footsteps. The door creaked open, revealing a man who seemed carved from the village's history. Old Mr. Wren was stooped, his face a labyrinth of wrinkles, his eyes sharp despite their rheumy haze. A woolen scarf hung loosely around his neck, and his hands, gnarled as oak roots, gripped a cane. "Who are you?" he rasped, squinting at Poirot. "I don't take visitors." "Monsieur Wren," Poirot said, bowing slightly. "I am Hercule Poirot, a detective. I come seeking knowledge of St. Aldwin's past, particularly the year 1895. I am told you are a man of memory." Wren's eyes narrowed, but a flicker of curiosity crossed his face. "Memory's a curse, not a gift. What's 1895 to you?" "A grave," Poirot replied, his tone measured. "One without a name in the churchyard. Its epitaph speaks of deceit and truth unspoken. You were here then, n'est-ce pas? What do you know?" Wren hesitated, then stepped back, gesturing Poirot inside. The cottage was a museum of clutter. Books stacked precariously, maps pinned to walls, a desk buried under yellowed papers. A single candle burned, casting shadows that danced like ghosts. "Sit," Wren said, sinking into a chair. "You're chasing shadows, monsieur. That grave's a riddle nobody's solved." "Yet riddles are my specialty," Poirot said, perching on a stool, his eyes scanning the room. A faded photograph on the mantel caught his attention. A group of villagers, dated 1894, their faces stern. "Tell me, who lies in that grave?" Wren's fingers tightened on his cane. "Nobody knows for sure. Back then, folks said it was a woman. Lydia, some called her. A seamstress, lived on the village's edge. Quiet, kept to herself. Then one day she was gone. Buried, they said, but no one saw a funeral." Poirot leaned forward, his gaze piercing. "Lydia. And why was her name not carved? Was she shunned, as some say?" Wren's lips twitched, a ghost of a smirk. "Shunned? Aye, by some. There was talk. Money gone missing from the church fund, whispers of a lover who betrayed her. Folks said she took her own life, and the vicar, old Grayson, refused her a proper burial. But," he trailed off, his eyes distant. "But," Poirot prompted, his voice soft but insistent. Wren's gaze snapped back. "And I saw her, night before she vanished, at the churchyard, digging near that yew tree. Looked scared, like she was hiding something. Next day she was gone, and the grave appeared soon after." "Most interessant," Poirot murmured, his grey cells alight. "Digging, you say? And this lover, who was he?" Wren shook his head. "Never knew. Some said a wealthy man passing through. Others thought it was someone local, but nobody named names. Village kept it quiet." Poirot's eyes drifted to the desk, where a small locked box sat, its lid engraved with a faint initial, L. "You keep many records, Monsieur Wren. Have you papers from 1895? Letters, perhaps, or diaries?" Wren's hand moved instinctively toward the box, then stopped. "Nothing you'd find useful, just old scribbles. I was a boy then, barely 16. Kept notes, that's all." "Notes can be most revealing," Poirot said, his smile polite but probing. "And this Lydia, did you know her well?" Wren's face hardened. "Well enough to know she didn't deserve what happened. But I've said too much. You want answers? Ask the Hendersons. They were thick with the church back then." Poirot noted the deflection, the way Wren's fingers lingered near the box. "Merci, monsieur. You have been most illuminating. I shall return, perhaps, when your memory is less guarded." Wren grunted, rising to show him out. As Poirot stepped into the fog, he glanced back, catching Wren's silhouette at the window, watching. The old man knew more, much more. The locked box, the photograph, the story of Lydia digging in the churchyard. They were pieces of a puzzle, but the picture remained elusive. Walking back toward the village, Poirot's mind churned. Lydia, a seamstress, accused of theft, betrayed by a lover, seen digging before her disappearance. Was she the grave's occupant or its architect? The epitaph's words, deceit and truth unspoken, felt personal, as if written by someone who knew her intimately. And Wren's evasiveness marked him as a suspect, not merely a witness. The church steeple loomed ahead, its frozen clock a silent sentinel. Poirot paused, his eyes on the distant grave. "You are no ordinary tombstone," he said softly. "You are a confession, n'est-ce pas?" "But whose?" Chapter 6. Shadows in the Churchyard. The moon hung low over St. Aldwin, its light fractured by the ever-present fog, casting the churchyard in a silvery gloom. Hercule Poirot moved silently through the iron gate, his black overcoat blending with the shadows. The village slept, its cottages dark, but the grave beneath the yew tree called, to him, its secrets as restless as his grey cells. Old Mr. Wren's tale of Lydia digging in this very spot 30 years ago had stirred Poirot's curiosity, and the trace of red wax found at the tombstone's base demanded further scrutiny. Night, he reasoned, would reveal what day concealed. "Mon Dieu," he whispered, his breath visible in the chill air. "The darkness, it is a canvas for truth. Let us see what this grave hides." He carried a small lantern, its beam focused low to avoid drawing attention. The nameless tombstone loomed ahead, its epitaph. "Here lies one who bore the weight of deceit, condemned by truth unspoken," etched in stark relief. Poirot knelt, his gloved hands brushing the grass where he'd spotted the wax trace days before. The ground was firm, undisturbed by recent digging, but the memory of Lydia's nocturnal labours in 1895 gnawed at him. What had she buried, or uncovered? Using a pocket-knife, he probed the soil at the stone's base, his movements precise. The blade struck something solid, a metallic clink, faint but unmistakable. Poirot's pulse quickened. He widened the hole, revealing a small rusted tin, no larger than a cigarette case, embedded in the earth. Its surface was pitted, but a faint engraving caught the lantern's light. A single initial, L. "Voilà," Poirot murmured, extracting the tin with care. "Lydia, is it you who speaks from the shadows?" The tin was locked, its mechanism corroded but intact. He slipped it into his coat pocket, intending to examine it later, and turned his attention to the yew tree above. Wren had said Lydia was digging near the tree, not at the grave itself. Poirot circled its gnarled trunk, the lantern illuminating roots that twisted like veins. At the base, where the roots met the soil, he noticed a patch of earth slightly, softer than the rest, as if recently disturbed. He knelt again, scraping away dirt with his knife. The soil yielded easily, revealing a small cloth-wrapped bundle. Unfolding it, Poirot found a fragment of paper, yellowed and brittle, its ink faded but legible. It bore a single line in a hurried script. "Forgive me, for I cannot speak the truth." Below was a date, April 1895. Sacre bleu! Poirot breathed, his mind racing. The note's date matched the burial record's unknown entry, and its tone echoed the epitaph's remorse. Was this Lydia's confession, or a plea from another? The cloth, he noted, was fine silk, stained but embroidered with a delicate L, further evidence of the seamstress's involvement. A twig snapped behind him, sharp in the silence. Poirot froze, extinguishing the lantern with a flick of his wrist. His eyes, adjusted to the dark, scanned the churchyard. The fog shifted, revealing a silhouette near the church gate. Tall, motionless, cloaked in shadow. Poirot's heart thudded, not with fear, but with the thrill of pursuit. Whoever watched him knew the grave significance. "Monsieur or Madame?" he called softly, his voice carrying through the mist. "You are most curious, but Hercule Poirot, he sees even in the dark. Show yourself." The figure hesitated, then melted into the fog, footsteps fading toward the village. Poirot considered pursuit but dismissed it. His quarry would not escape for long. Instead, he pocketed the note and cloth, recovered the disturbed earth, and stood brushing his gloves. "The grave, it yields its secrets," he said to the tombstone. "But you still lie. Who placed you here and why?" As he left at the churchyard, the frozen church clock loomed above, its hands eternally fixed at midnight. Poirot's mind churned. The tin and note were tangible links to 1895. But the watcher's presence suggested the mystery was not confined to the past. Someone in St. Aldwin feared what he might uncover. Someone with access to the churchyard, knowledge of Lydia's story, and perhaps crimson sealing wax. Back at the Raven's Rest, Poirot locked his door and examined his finds by candlelight. The tin resisted his attempts to open it, but the note's words haunted him. "Forgive me, for I cannot speak the truth." They were a mirror to the epitaph, a cry from a soul bound by silence. Lydia, he suspected, was more than a victim. She was a key to a betrayal that still poisoned the village. He leaned back, his eyes gleaming. The shadows, they watch, but Hercule Poirot, he watches better. The game, it grows most intriguing. Chapter 7. The Locked Diary. The candle in Hercule Poirot's room at the Raven's Rest burned low, casting flickering shadows across the walls. The rusted tin from the churchyard sat on the table before him, its engraved L glinting like a challenge. Beside it lay the silk-wrapped note. "Forgive me, for I cannot speak the truth." April 1895. Its words a haunting echo of the tombstone's epitaph. Poirot's grey cells thrummed with anticipation as he worked to open the tin. His tools, a small screwdriver and a pair of tweezers, moving with surgical precision. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, "you are a stubborn little box. But Hercule Poirot, he does not yield to locks, whether of metal or of secrets." The corroded clasp resisted, but a faint click rewarded his patience. The lid sprang open, revealing a slim leather-bound booklet, its edges frayed but intact. The cover bore no name, only the same L etched faintly in gold. Poirot lifted it carefully, noting its weight, light yet heavy with promise. He opened it, expecting a diary's narrative, but found instead a series of cryptic entries written in a meticulous hand. Each page was a grid of numbers and symbols, interspersed with fragmented phrases. 12 debour 95. The debt grows heavier. Trust is a blade turned inward. The you knows all. The numbers, seemingly random sequences like 7-32 or 1981, formed a code Poirot recognized as a substitution cipher, though its key eluded him. The final entry, dated 15th April 1895, was chilling. They will bury the truth with me, L. Sacre bleu! Poirot breathed, his eyes gleaming. A diary, yes, but one that guards its heart. Lydia, is this your voice, or another's hiding behind your initial? He leaned back, his mind dissecting the entries. The date of the final entry aligned with the burial record's unknown interment, and the reference to the yew tree matched Wren's story of Lydia digging there. The phrases spoke of betrayal and debt, mirroring the epitaph's themes of deceit and unspoken truth. But the code, what did it conceal? Names, locations, a confession. A knock at the door startled him. Poirot slipped the diary into his pocket, his senses alert. "Entrez," he called, his tone calm but wary. Eleanor Vance stepped inside, her face pale, her hands twisting her ever-present handkerchief. "Monsieur Poirot, I'm sorry to disturb you so late, but I saw someone outside, near the inn, watching your window." Poirot's eyebrows arched. "Vraiment? And this watcher, madam, did you recognize them?" She shook her head. "It was too dark, but they were tall, wearing a long coat. I thought you should know after the churchyard." "Merci, Madame Vance," Poirot said, his mind flashing to the silhouette he'd seen the previous night. "You are most observant. Tell me, have you ever seen a diary or papers marked with an L in your husband's effects? Perhaps among the sealing wax?" Eleanor frowned, thinking, "Not that I recall. My husband kept records, but they were ledgers, not diaries. Why do you ask?" Poirot smiled thinly. "A hunch, nothing more. But the past, it leaves traces, n'est-ce pas? I shall call on you tomorrow. For now, lock your door and rest." After she left, Poirot returned to the diary, his fingers tracing the coded numbers. He needed a key, a name, a phrase, perhaps tied to Lydia or the church. The mention of the you knows all suggested the tree itself held significance beyond its role as a landmark. And the watcher, twice now, they had shadowed him. Were they protecting the grave's secret or seeking it? He extinguished the candle, plunging the room into darkness, and moved to the window. The street below was empty, the fog a silent shroud, but Poirot felt the weight of unseen eyes. "You watch, mon ami," he whispered, "but you cannot hide forever. The diary, it speaks, and I shall make it sing." Sleep eluded him that night, his mind a whirlwind of clues. The pristine tombstone, the wax trace, the note's plea, and now the coded diary. Each pointed to a truth buried in 1895, yet preserved by someone in the present. The epitaph was no mere memorial. It was a taunt, a dare to uncover what St. Aldwin had concealed for 30 years. As dawn crept through the fog, Poirot resolved to revisit the yew tree by daylight, to search for what Lydia's diary might still hide. But first he would confront old Mr. Wren again. The historian's locked box, marked with an L, was too similar to the tin to be coincidence. Wren, he suspected, was not merely a witness. He was a player in this game of deceit. "Patience, Hercule Poirot," he told himself, adjusting his moustache in the mirror. "The truth, it waits, but it cannot hide from you." Chapter 8. A web of lies. The morning fog had thinned, but St. Aldwin's air remained heavy with secrets as Hercule Poirot made his way to old Mr. Wren's cottage. The coded diary, tucked securely in his coat pocket, weighed on his mind. Its cryptic entries and the L on its cover linked it to the nameless grave, and he suspected to the locked box Wren guarded. The historian's guarded demeanour and his tale of Lydia digging in 1895 marked him as more than a bystander. Poirot's grey cells buzzed with anticipation, ready to unravel the threads of deceit. "Mon ami," he murmured, tapping his cane on the path, "you hide behind your years, but Hercule Poirot, he sees through the mask of time." At the cottage, the door was ajar, a sliver of candlelight spilling onto the step. Poirot knocked, his rap echoing in the stillness. Wren appeared, his face more haggard than before, his eyes darting past Poirot as if expecting another visitor. "Monsieur Poirot," Wren said, his voice gruff. "Back so soon? I've nothing more to say." "Au contraire," Poirot replied, stepping inside uninvited, his smile polite but firm. "You have much to say, Monsieur Wren, particularly about a certain box. One marked with an L, much like this." He produced the rusted tin from his pocket, holding it just long enough for Wren's eyes to widen. Wren's hand tightened on his cane. "Where do you get that? It's not yours." "From the churchyard," Poirot said, his tone measured. "Near the nameless grave, where Lydia, you said, was seen digging. This tin contained a diary, coded and most revealing. Your box, I think, holds a similar secret. Shall we open it?" Wren's face flushed, a mix of anger and fear. "You've no right to meddle. That box is private, family heirlooms, nothing to do with your mystery." "Family, monsieur?" Poirot's eyebrows arched. "Yet the initial L suggests a connection to Lydia, the seamstress who vanished in 1895. Were you her family, her friend, or perhaps her betrayer?" Wren slammed his cane against the floor. "Enough! I was a boy then, 16 no more. Lydia was kind to me, taught me to read. I'd never betray her. But others—" He stopped, his breath ragged. "Others?" Poirot pressed, his voice soft but relentless. "Who, monsieur? The lover who abandoned her? The villagers who shunned her for theft?" Wren sank into a chair, his defiance crumbling. "The Hendersons," he muttered. "They were powerful then, owned half the village. Lydia worked for them, sewed their clothes. When money went missing from the church, they pointed fingers at her, said she stole to run off with some man. But I never believed it." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And this man? You said he was wealthy, a stranger. Did the Hendersons know him?" Wren's gaze flickered to the locked box on his desk. "They knew more than they let on. After Lydia vanished, the Hendersons got richer, bought land, built that big house on the hill. Folk whispered they'd sold her out, but nobody dared say it aloud. Most interessant," Poirot said, circling the desk. "And your box, monsieur. Does it hold proof of these whispers?" Wren lunged forward, snatching the box and clutching it to his chest. "Stay back! It's mine, and you'll not have it without a fight." Before Poirot could respond, a commotion erupted outside. Voices, angry, overlapping, drew near. They do. Door burst open, and Mrs. Tuttle stormed in, followed by Clara Henderson and a burly man Poirot hadn't seen before, his face red with indignation. "What's this about the Hendersons?" the man bellowed, glaring at Wren. "You spreading lies again, old man?" Clara stepped forward, her voice trembling. "Monsieur Poirot, this is my uncle, Thomas Henderson. He heard you were asking questions, stirring up trouble." "Trouble?" Poirot said, unfazed, his eyes scanning the group. "I seek only the truth, Monsieur Henderson. The grave in the churchyard, it speaks of deceit. Your family, I am told, was close to Lydia in 1895. What do you know of her fate?" Thomas's fists clenched. "Lydia was a thief, plain and simple, stole from the church and ran. My father tried to help her, gave her work, but she betrayed us. That grave's hers, and good riddance." Mrs. Tuttle snorted. "Don't play innocent, Thomas. Your father was no saint. He and that Vicar Grayson, they covered something up. Everyone knew it." "Enough!" Thomas roared, stepping toward her. Wren shrank back, clutching his box, while Clara looked torn, her eyes darting between her uncle and Poirot. Poirot raised a hand, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Silence, s'il vous plaît. You accuse, you defend, but you all conceal. The diary I found speaks of a debt, a betrayal, and the yew tree. One of you knows more, perhaps the one who watches me in the night." The room fell silent, faces frozen in shock or guilt. Thomas's jaw tightened, Mrs. Tuttle's eyes narrowed, and Wren's fingers trembled on his box. Clara alone seemed genuinely startled, her gaze fixed on Poirot. "Mon Dieu," Poirot said, his tone calm but piercing. "The web of lies, it tightens, but Hercule Poirot, he will cut through it. Monsieur Wren, I shall return for your box. The rest of you, reflect on what you hide. For the truth, it will not stay buried." As he left the cottage, the fog seemed to pulse with the village's tension. Greed, revenge, betrayal. The motives were surfacing, but the diary's code and the watcher's identity remained elusive. The nameless grave, Poirot knew, was no longer just a mystery. It was a battleground. Chapter 9. The Second Grave. The churchyard of St. Aldwin lay under a shroud of midday mist, its tombstones like silent witnesses to Hercule Poirot's relentless pursuit of truth. The confrontation at old Mr. Wren's cottage had left the village simmering, and Poirot, ever the strategist, returned to the nameless grave to seek clarity amid the chaos. The coded diary in his pocket, with its cryptic references to debts, and the yew tree urged him to re-examine the site of Lydia's mysterious digging. But the churchyard, he would soon learn, held more secrets than he anticipated. "Mon Dieu," Poirot murmured, adjusting his hat against the damp air. "The grave, it speaks, but perhaps it is not alone in its silence." He stood before the nameless tombstone, its epitaph. "Here lies one who bore the weight of deceit, condemned by truth unspoken." As enigmatic as ever, the yew tree loomed nearby, its roots a tangled map of the past. Poirot's eyes traced the ground where he'd found the rusted tin and the silk-wrapped note, but his attention shifted to the tree's far side, where the earth seemed uneven, as if disturbed long ago and left to settle. Kneeling, he brushed away leaves and moss, revealing a patch of soil subtly different from its surroundings, compacted, but lacking the grass that cloaked the rest of the churchyard. His pulse quickened. With his pocket-knife, he probed gently, expecting another buried relic. Instead, the blade struck stone, flat and smooth, buried just beneath the surface. "Sacre bleu!" Poirot whispered, widening the excavation. The stone was small, no larger than a paving slab, and unmarked save for a single weathered symbol, a cross, crudely etched with no name or date. The ground around it was firm, suggesting it had lain undisturbed for decades. A second grave, hidden from view without even the dignity of an epitaph. Poirot stood, his mind racing. Another grave, sans nom? The plot it thickens, n'est-ce pas? He circled the site, noting its proximity to the yew tree and the first grave. The diary's phrase, "The yew knows all," took on new weight. Was this grave connected to Lydia's story, or did it mark another victim of 1895's betrayal? Footsteps crunched behind him, and Poirot turned, his hand instinctively on his cane. Clara Henderson emerged from the fog, her auburn hair damp, her eyes wide with unease. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, her voice low, "I saw you from the inn. What are you doing?" "Mademoiselle Clara," Poirot replied, his tone calm but probing, "I am uncovering truths. This stone, do you know of it? A grave hidden without a name?" Clara's gaze fell to the unearthed slab, and she gasped, stepping back. "Another grave? No, nobody's ever mentioned it. The churchyard's old, but why hide it?" "Précisément," Poirot said, watching her closely. "To hide is to fear discovery. Your family, the Hendersons, were prominent in 1895. Did your grandmother, perhaps, speak of another death, one not recorded?" Clara shook her head, but her hands fidgeted. She only talked about Lydia, said she was wronged, that the village judged her too quickly. But 2 graves? It's awful! Poirot's eyes narrowed. Awful, yes, but also revealing. The first grave accuses with its epitaph. This one, it is silent, yet it speaks of a pattern. Tell me, mademoiselle, who else might know the churchyard's secrets? Clara hesitated, glancing toward the church. Reverend Hale, maybe. He studied the old records, even the ones that survived the fire. Or my uncle Thomas. He's always been touchy about the past. Merci, Poirot said, filing away her words. You are most helpful. But take care, mademoiselle. The one who watches me may watch others. Clara's face paled. You think someone's following you because of the graves? Poirot smiled thinly. I do not think I know. And they grow bold. Return to the inn and say nothing of this for now. As Clara hurried away, Poirot knelt again, examining the hidden stone. Its cross suggested a burial, but its secrecy implied shame or fear. Was this the true resting place of Lydia, while the named grave was a decoy? Or did it mark another casualty of the betrayal hinted at in the diary? The Hendersons' wealth, Wren's guarded box, the Watcher's vigilance, all pointed to a conspiracy that spanned generations. He covered the stone, ensuring it remained hidden, and stood, his gaze sweeping the churchyard. The fog seemed, too, pulse with unseen eyes, and the frozen church clock loomed above, a silent witness to the village's sins. 2 graves, Poirot said softly, addressing the yew tree. 2 lies, perhaps, but Hercule Poirot, he will find the truth that binds you. As he left the churchyard, a plan formed. He would press Reverend Hale about the records and confront Thomas Henderson about his family's role in 1895. The diary's code, he sensed, held the key to both graves, and decoding it was now urgent. But the watcher's shadow loomed larger, a reminder that the past was not merely a puzzle, it was a threat. Chapter 10. The Code Unravelled. The small desk in Hercule Poirot's room at the Raven's Rest was a battlefield of papers, the coded diary open at its centre like a general's map. The candlelight flickered, casting shadows over the cryptic entries, number sequences, fragmented phrases, and the haunting final note, "They will bury the truth with me. L. 15th April, 1895. The discovery of the second unmarked grave beneath. The yew tree had intensified Poirot's resolve. The diary, he was certain, held the key to both graves and the crime that bound them to St. Aldwin's past. "Patience, Hercule Poirot," he murmured, adjusting his spectacles. "The code. It is a lock, and you are the master of keys. The number sequences, 732, 1981, and others, were a substitution cipher, each triplet likely representing a letter or word. Poirot had spent hours testing keys, from Lydia's name to phrases like you or deceit. Now, inspired by the epitaph-style truth unspoken, he tried it as a cipher key, mapping its letters to numbers based on their position in the alphabet. After meticulous calculations, the first sequence, 732, resolved to GCB, then to a word when adjusted for a simple shift. Pay. Voila! Poirot breathed, his grey cells alight. He applied the key to other sequences, decoding fragments. Pay the debt. He lies. Church hides. The diary's entries began to form a narrative, each phrase a shard of a shattered truth. One entry, dated 10th April 1895, was particularly damning. "He took the gold, blamed me. The cross marks his sin, not mine." L. Poirot leaned back, his eyes gleaming. Mon Dieu, a theft, a false accusation, and a cross, précisément like the second grave's marker. "Lydia, you were no thief, but a witness to a crime." The decoded entries painted a vivid picture. Lydia, the seamstress, had uncovered a theft. Gold, likely from the church fund, as Wren had mentioned. Someone, a man referred to only as he, had framed her, leading to her shunning and disappearance. The cross in the diary matched the crude etching on the hidden grave, suggesting it marked not Lydia, but the true culprit, or another victim of the same betrayal. The first grave, with its pristine tombstone, was a later addition, its epitaph, a taunt or a confession. A knock at the door broke his reverie. Poirot slipped the diary into his pocket, his senses sharp. "Entrez!" he called. Reverend Hale stepped inside, his cassock immaculate, but his face strained. "Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice low, "the village is in an uproar. Your questions about the graves, they're reopening old wounds. I urge you to stop." Poirot tilted his head, his smile polite but piercing. "Monsieur le Révérend, wounds do not heal when filled with lies. I have found a diary, coded, from 1895. It speaks of stolen gold, a false accusation, and a cross that marks a sin. You keep the church records. Tell me, what do you know of this theft?" Hale's hands clenched, his knuckles white. Theft. There were rumours, yes, but nothing proven. The church fund was short that year, and Lydia was blamed. I wasn't. Here then, Father Grayson handled it. "Oui, Grayson," Poirot said, his tone deceptively mild. A convenient figure now dead. Yet the second grave, hidden under the yew, bears a cross. Is it Grayson's, or another's, buried to silence their truth? Hale's eyes widened, a flicker of fear betraying him. "A second grave. I know nothing of it. The churchyard is old, full of forgotten stones." "Forgotten, perhaps," Poirot countered, "but not invisible. The diary accuses a man, wealthy, who profited from Lydia's ruin. The Hendersons, they grew rich after 1895. What do you say to that?" Hale stepped back, his composure fraying. "You're chasing ghosts, monsieur. The Hendersons are respected. Leave the past alone, or you'll regret it." "Regret?" Poirot's voice was steel beneath velvet. "The only regret is for those who hide the truth. Merci, Reverend, for your candour. It reveals much." Hale left abruptly, his footsteps echoing down the inn's stairs. Poirot sat, his mind racing. The diary's decoded entries confirmed crime, gold stolen, Lydia framed, a man's sin marked by a hidden grave. The Hendersons' wealth, Wren's guarded box, Hale's evasiveness, all pointed to a conspiracy rooted in 1895, but alive in the present. The watcher, Poirot suspected, was no mere observer, but a guardian of this secret. He opened the diary again, rereading a decoded line. Church hides. The church itself, its records, its walls, perhaps even its frozen clock, held the final clue. But the second grave shifted everything. If it marked the true thief, then the first grave, with its new tombstone, was a deliberate misdirection, placed to confuse or accuse. Mon Dieu, Poirot said, addressing the candle's flame. Or the crime, it is not one act but two, one buried, one displayed. The truth, it waits, and Hercule Poirot, he shall find it. As he prepared to confront Thomas Henderson, a shadow passed his window, fleeting but unmistakable. The watcher was close, their desperation growing. Poirot smiled grimly. The game was nearing its end, and he was ready to play his hand. Chapter 11. Confronting the Guilty. The parlour of the Raven's Rest was a stage set for truth, its low ceiling and flickering firelight amplifying the tension among the gathered villagers. Hercule Poirot stood at the centre, his small, neat figure commanding, the room like a maestro. Around him sat the suspects. Old Mr. Wren, clutching his cane. Reverend Hale, his face a mask of strained calm. Thomas Henderson, his fists clenched. Mrs. Tuttle, her eyes sharp with defiance. Clara Henderson, nervous but attentive. And Eleanor Vance, twisting her handkerchief. The fog pressed against the windows, sealing them in with their secrets. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began, his voice clear and deliberate. You are here because the nameless grave in your churchyard, it cries for justice. Its epitaph, here lies one who bore the weight of deceit, condemned by truth unspoken, is no mere memorial. It is an accusation, and tonight Hercule Poirot shall name the guilty." A murmur rippled through the room, but Poirot's raised hand silenced it. "Let us begin with the facts. In 1895, a seamstress named Lydia vanished, accused of stealing gold from the church fund. She was shunned, her name erased, and a grave appeared, without a name, but with an epitaph that speaks of betrayal. Yet this tombstone, it is new, placed within the last year, its stone unweathered. Why? To conceal or to reveal?" Thomas Henderson scoffed. "This is nonsense. Lydia stole and ran. That grave's hers. End of story." "Non, monsieur," Poirot countered, his eyes gleaming. "The grave lies. A diary, found in a tin marked L, tells a different tale. Its coded entries, which I have deciphered, reveal that Lydia was no thief. She discovered a theft. Gold taken by a man who framed her. This man, he profited, while Lydia was condemned. And your family, Monsieur Henderson, grew wealthy after 1895, buying land and power. A coincidence, perhaps?" Thomas's face reddened. "You're accusing my father. He was a good man, helped this village." "Helped or exploited?" Poirot turned to Wren. "Monsieur Wren, you knew Lydia. You saw her digging near the yew tree, hiding something. Perhaps the diary, to protect her truth. Your box, also marked L, holds papers from that time. Why do you guard them so fiercely?" Wren's hands trembled. "They're personal. Letters. Nothing more. I told you, Lydia was kind to me. I'd never hurt her." "Yet you hide," Poirot said softly, then pivoted to Hale. "Monsieur le Révérend, the church records are sparse, conveniently so. A burial in April 1895, for an unknown, with no ceremony. And a second grave, hidden beneath the yew, marked only by a cross. The diary speaks of a sin marked by a cross. Was it Father Grayson's, the vicar, who buried Lydia's truth?" Hale's jaw tightened. "I know nothing of a second grave. The record's burned, as I told you. You're weaving fantasies." "Fantasies?" Poirot's voice sharpened. "Madame, Tuttle, you call the past dust, yet you defend it with fire. Were you part of the village that shunned Lydia? Or did you know the true thief?" Mrs. Tuttle's eyes flashed. "I was young, but I saw enough. Lydia was no saint, but the Hendersons, they were greedy, always have been." Clara gasped, looking at her uncle, but Thomas slammed his fist on the table. "Lies! You're all turning on us because of this outsider." Silence. Poirot's voice cut through the chaos. "There is more. A note found with the diary reads, 'Forgive me, for I cannot speak the truth.' It is dated April 1895, the same as the burial, and the diary's final entry. 'They will bury the truth with me. L.' Lydia, I believe, was silenced, not by suicide, but by murder. The first grave, with its new tombstone, was placed to distract from the second, the true resting place of the thief, or another victim." Eleanor Vance spoke, her voice trembling. "Murder! But who would do such a thing?" Poirot's gaze swept the room. Someone who profited, someone who feared Lydia's truth. The Hendersons gained wealth. The church hid records, and one of you. He paused, his eyes lingering on each face. "One of you watches me, follows me, guards this secret. The crimson wax on my summons, Madame Vance, matches a trace at the grave. Did you place the tombstone to stir the past, or to bury. It deeper? Eleanor paled. I only wrote the letter. The wax was my husband's, but I didn't know about murder. The room erupted. Accusations, denials, voices overlapping. Poirot watched, his expression unreadable, withholding one crucial detail. The diary's decoded line, "He lies in the church." It suggested the thief's body was not in the second grave, but hidden within the church itself, perhaps beneath the frozen clock or a false floor. By omitting this, Poirot baited the culprit, waiting for a telltale reaction. Mrs. Tuttle stood, pointing at Thomas. "Ask him about his father's deals. He knew Grayson, paid him off." Thomas lunged toward her, but Clara pulled him back, tears in her eyes. Wren clutched his box tighter, and Hale's hands shook. Poirot's grey cells hummed. This chaos was the crucible where truth would emerge. "Enough," Poirot said, his voice a whip. "The guilty, they are here and they will not escape. Reflect, mes amis, for tomorrow I shall return to the church. The truth, it waits, and Hercule Poirot, he will find it." As the villagers dispersed, their faces etched with fear or fury, Poirot remained, his eyes on the fire. The watcher, he knew, was among them, and his gambit had set the trap, the final. Peace was close, so close. Chapter 12. The Final Twist. The church of St. Aldwin stood silent under a sky bruised with dawn's first light, its frozen clock a sentinel over the secrets within. Hercule Poirot entered alone, his polished shoes echoing on the stone floor, his mind a mosaic of clues now falling into place. The coded diary's final decoded line, "He lies in the church," had been his trump card, withheld during the Aids, confrontation to lure the guilty. The nameless tombstone, the hidden grave, the crimson wax, the watcher's shadow, all pointed to a truth more audacious than murder alone. Today, Poirot would unveil it. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, pausing beneath the clock. "The church, it hides, but not from Hercule Poirot." He moved to the vestry, where the dusty ledgers lay, but his focus was elsewhere. On the altar, where a heavy stone slab formed its base, the diary's church hides, and the frozen clock, stuck at midnight, suggested a mechanism or secret, tied to the church's heart. Poirot examined the slab, his gloved fingers tracing its edges. A faint seam, nearly invisible, hinted at a hidden compartment. With effort, he pressed a loose corner, and a low grind echoed as the slab shifted, revealing a narrow cavity. Inside was a small, sealed packet, wrapped in silk and marked with crimson wax. Poirot's pulse quickened. He broke the seal, finding a letter dated April 1895, in the same meticulous hand as the diary. It read, "The gold is safe, hidden where none will look. Grayson knows, but he is bought. Forgive me, Lydia, for my silence." "E, sacrebleu," Poirot whispered. The initial E, not Lydia, but another. The pieces snapped together. The tombstone's purpose, the second grave, the mastermind's identity. He pocketed the letter and closed the compartment, his plan set. By noon, the villagers gathered in the church, summoned by Poirot's urgent request. Old Mr. Wren, Reverend Hale, Thomas Henderson, Mrs. Tuttle, Clara Henderson, and Eleanor Vance stood in a tense semicircle, their faces a mix of dread and defiance. The nameless tombstone's shadow seemed to loom through the walls. "Mesdames et messieurs," Poirot began, his voice resonant, "the puzzle of the nameless grave is solved. The tombstone, it lies, not about Lydia, but about the crime itself. Let us unravel the truth." He paced, his eyes sweeping the group. In 1895, gold was stolen from the church fund. Lydia, the seamstress, was blamed, but she was innocent. The diary, coded and hidden, reveals she knew the thief, a man who framed her, with the complicity of Father Grayson. This man's sin was marked by a cross in a hidden grave beneath the yew. But the first grave, with its new tombstone, was no burial. It was a distraction, placed last year to stir the past. Thomas Henderson growled, "You're still on about my father? Prove it." "Patience, monsieur," Poirot said, raising a hand. "The diary names no thief, but it speaks of a debt, and a man who profited. Your family, the Hendersons, gained wealth after 1895. Yet you are not the mastermind. The second grave, with its cross, is not your father's. It is Father Grayson's, killed to silence his guilt." Hale gasped, his face ashen. "Grayson! That's absurd!" "Non, monsieur," Poirot countered. "The records, sparse and convenient, hide his fate. But the true twist lies elsewhere. The diary's final clue, he lies in the church, led me to a letter, hidden in this very altar. It reveals the gold's hiding place and names the true thief, not a man but a woman, Madame Eleanor Vance." Eleanor's handkerchief fell, her eyes wide with shock, or feigned shock. "Me? That's madness. I only wrote to you, Monsieur Poirot." "Précisément," Poirot said, his voice like steel. "You wrote to summon me, using your late husband's crimson wax, the same wax found at the grave. You placed the tombstone last year, knowing it would stir suspicion. Why? Because you are the author of the letter, the thief of the gold, and Lydia's betrayer. You were young in 1895, a friend to Lydia, but you coveted the church's wealth. You stole the gold, framed Lydia, and let her take her life in despair. Grayson, your accomplice, was killed and buried in secret when he threatened to confess. The gold you hid here in the church, funding your quiet life after your husband's death." Eleanor laughed, a brittle sound. "This is fantasy. You've no proof." "Au contraire," Poirot said, producing the letter. "Your hand, your wax, your initial. The diary, Lydia's, accuses you indirectly. But this letter is your confession, written in guilt but never sent. And you, madame, were the watcher, following me to ensure I did not find the gold before you could retrieve it." The room was silent, all eyes on Eleanor. Wren's face crumpled, as if an old wound reopened. Clara whispered, "Is it true?" Thomas looked stunned, his anger deflated. Hale's hands shook, and Mrs. Tuttle nodded grimly, as if long suspecting. Eleanor's composure cracked. "You don't understand," she choked. "Lydia, she was going to tell. I had no choice. The gold was my only way out of this wretched village. I didn't mean for her to die." Poirot's gaze softened, but his voice was firm. "You chose greed over friendship, silence over justice. The tombstone you placed to ease your conscience, but it betrayed you. The truth, it is unspoken, no longer. As Eleanor sank to her knees, sobbing, Poirot turned to the others. The gold remains hidden, but it will be found. The graves, they will be honoured. And you, mes amis, must learn from this. Deceit buries only the heart. Chapter 13. The resolution, the church of St. Aldwin, was bathed in the soft glow of late afternoon, its stained-glass windows casting kaleidoscopic patterns across the stone floor. Hercule Poirot stood before the altar, where the hidden compartment had yielded Eleanor Vance's damning letter. The villagers, old Mr. Wren, Reverend Hale, Thomas Henderson, Mrs. Tuttle, and Clara Henderson, gathered once more, their faces a mix of shock, guilt, and relief. Eleanor had been taken by the local constable, her confession still echoing in their minds. Now, Poirot would lay bare the full truth, ensuring the Nameless grave story was complete. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began, his voice steady, the puzzle of the Nameless grave is solved, but the truth, it demands clarity. Let us walk through the shadows to the light. He paced, his hands clasped behind him, his eyes sharp. In 1895 a crime was committed. Not one act, but a chain of betrayals. Eleanor Vance, then a young woman, stole gold from the church fund, driven by a desire to escape St. Aldwin's confines. Lydia, the seamstress, discovered her theft. Eleanor, fearing exposure, framed Lydia, accusing her of the crime with the help of Father Grayson, the vicar, whom she bribed. Wren's voice cracked. Lydia, she was kind. She didn't deserve that. Non, Monsieur Wren, Poirot said gently. Lydia was shunned, her spirit broken. The diary, coded and hidden beneath the yew tree, was her attempt to preserve the truth. Its entries. Pay the debt, he lies, accused Eleanor, though not by name. Lydia took her own life, and Eleanor, with Grayson's complicity, buried her in an unmarked grave, the one we know as the Nameless tomb. But the epitaph was not yet carved. Clara's eyes glistened. Then why the tombstone? Why now? Poirot turned to her, his expression sombre. The tombstone, mademoiselle, was Eleanor's act of guilt, placed last year after decades of silence. She crafted its epitaph. Here lies one who bore the weight of deceit, condemned by truth unspoken, to honour Lydia, but also to deflect suspicion. The stone, pristine and new, was meant to suggest a recent burial, hiding the older truth. Thomas, Henderson shifted, his voice gruff. And Grayson? You said he's in the second grave. Oui, monsieur, Poirot confirmed. Grayson, bought by Eleanor's gold, grew greedy or remorseful. When he threatened to confess, Eleanor killed him, burying him beneath the yew tree in a hidden grave marked only by a cross. As the diary noted, the cross marks his sin. The church records, altered or burned, concealed his death, listing only Lydia's burial as unknown. Reverend Hale's hands trembled. I suspected the records were incomplete, but I never imagined this. Poirot's gaze was piercing. Monsieur le Révérend, your reluctance aided the silence, but you are not the guilty. The letter in the altar, signed E, was Eleanor's confession, written in 1895, but hidden, perhaps to ease her conscience. The gold she kept secret, using it sparingly after her husband's death. And the crimson wax, used on my summons and found at the grave, was her signature. a careless thread that unravelled her. Mrs. Tuttle nodded grimly. I knew the Hendersons weren't clean, but Eleanor, she fooled us all. No, madame, Poirot corrected. The Hendersons profited indirectly, perhaps through deals with Eleanor, but their guilt is moral, not criminal. Eleanor was the mastermind, the watcher who followed me, fearing I would find the gold or her letter. Her summons to me was a gamble, to expose the past without implicating herself. But Hercule Poirot, he sees what is hidden. Clara wiped her eyes. What happens now? To the graves? To Lydia? Poirot's voice softened. The gold, it will be found, likely within the church, as the diary's church hides suggests. It will restore what was taken. Lydia's grave will be marked with her name, her honour restored. Grayson's too will be acknowledged, though his sin remains. Eleanor will face justice, but her confession, it frees this village from its silence. He paused, his eyes sweeping the group. The morale, mes amis, is this. Deceit buries the heart, but truth, it liberates. You, who lived in the shadow of 1895, must now live in the light. Reflect on your silence, your judgments, and choose better. The villagers nodded, some tearful, others resolute. Wren clutched his cane, whispering, "For Lydia!" Thomas hung. His head, Clara took his hand, and Hale murmured a prayer. Mrs. Tuttle, for once, was silent. Her defiance softened. As they dispersed, Poirot lingered, gazing at the frozen clock. The time, it moves again, he said softly. The truth, it is a heavy burden, but it sets the world right. Outside the fog was lifting, revealing St. Aldwin's quiet beauty. Poirot adjusted his hat, his moustache twitching with satisfaction. The case was closed, but its echoes, guilt, redemption, the fragility of trust, would linger in his grey cells, a reminder of why he pursued justice. Chapter 14. Epilogue. The Grave Restored. The sun broke through St. Aldwin's persistent fog, bathing the churchyard in a golden warmth that felt like absolution. A small crowd gathered near the yew tree, their faces sombre but hopeful. Hercule Poirot stood slightly apart, his black coat immaculate, his moustache perfectly waxed, his green eyes fixed on the newly carved tombstone. The old, deceitful slab had been removed, and in its place stood a simple granite marker, etched with truth. Lydia Marsh, 1868-1895. Beloved, not forgotten, mon Dieu, Poirot murmured. The grave, it speaks at last, and its voice is peace. Clara Henderson stepped forward, placing a bouquet of wildflowers at the stone's base. Her eyes were red but clear, her voice steady as she addressed the villagers. This is for Lydia, my family. We were wrong to stay silent. I hope she knows we're sorry. Old Mr. Wren, leaning heavily on his cane, nodded, his voice thick. She was kind to me, taught me to read. This is right. He'd finally opened his locked box, revealing letters from Lydia. Not evidence, but memories of her gentleness, shared now to honour her. Reverend Hale, his cassock slightly rumpled, spoke next. The gold was found, hidden in the altars. False panel, as Monsieur Poirot deduced. It will rebuild the church, fund a school, Lydia's legacy. His gaze met Poirot's, a silent acknowledgment of his own complicity in the silence. Mrs. Tuttle, her usual sharpness softened, added gruffly, "About time we did right. Lydia didn't deserve what happened." Thomas Henderson stood beside her, silent, his head bowed. The Hendersons' role in profiting from Eleanor's crime had shamed them, but their pledge to help restore the village was a start. Eleanor Vance's trial was pending, her confession ensuring justice. The second grave, Father Grayson's, had been marked with a plain cross, his story noted in the church records as a cautionary tale. The crimson wax, the coded diary, the frozen clock, all had served their purpose, guiding Poirot to the truth. Clara approached Poirot, her smile tentative. "Monsieur Poirot, will you stay for the service? We're dedicating it to Lydia." "Merci, mademoiselle," Poirot replied, bowing slightly. "But my work here is done. The train to London awaits, and Hercule Poirot, he must return to his tisane and his grey cells." She hesitated, then said, "You gave us back our peace. Thank you." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Peace, it is not given. It is earned by facing the truth. You, mademoiselle, and your village, you have done so. That is enough." As the villagers filed into the church, Poirot walked to the gate, pausing to glance at the restored grave. The case had been a tapestry of deceit, greed, betrayal, silence, but also of redemption. Lydia's story, once buried, now lived in the village's heart, a reminder that truth, though heavy, could heal. The train's whistle sounded in the distance, and Poirot adjusted his hat, a faint smile curving his lips. "The nameless grave, it is nameless no more," he said softly, and Hercule Poirot, he is satisfied. With a final nod to St. Aldwin, he stepped into the sunlight, the fog a memory, the future clear. The world he knew held other puzzles, and he was ready for them all.